Welcome everybody back to Friar Talk. Today, we're having a video. We haven't had a video in a while, dude. We've done a couple streams throughout the off season. It was, a very slow off season, not a lot of moves. Padres are just kind of waiting, not really involved in any rumors until the Pavetta deal. But outside of that, I mean, they make a couple small moves. And actually, today we're going to talk about these guys because we're going to talk about the roster battles in camp. And Connor Joe, Jason Hayward are part of the guys that are two of the guys that we're going to talk about today. But we're going to kind of break down like what's going on roster wise. I think just breaking it down positionally, what's going on for the Padres. The first one, the fifth starter, I think you have five guys vying for the spot. You have Kolek, Hart, Vasquez, Brito, Waldron. Those are like the main guys that kind of come to mind. I think if Kolek doesn't make it, like he could get sent down, right? If Hart doesn't make it, he could be in the bullpen. Uh, Vasquez and Waldron seem like the main guys that are competing for that spot, but we're really just gonna have to see how it plays out. We also tossed in a couple like kind of like honorable mentions: Henry Baez, Luis Patino, in that one, but I don't really expect either of them to win the fifth starter spot. So that's kind of the first one. The next one is going to be left field. And really, like you see the two signings we just talked about, Connor Joe, Jason Hayward. And then you have on the other side, the two younger guys that have been in the organization for a while that haven't got their opportunity to come up and actually like play in the bigs that much. Tirso Ornelas and Eggy Rosario. So those are the other two. Now, the interesting thing with Connor Joe is he also falls into our next roster battle, which I put it as like a first base DH roster battle. I feel like it's more first base, though we already know we're going to see Luis Ariz in that spot, at times. But, that first base DH kind of role. And I put Connor Joe in that, Gavin Sheets, and I think we had Gurriel as like kind of a guy, but we both don't really think he's going to make it, though. He started off spring training kind of well, like kind of doing well. So I don't know if you saw that, Chase. And then also, in with the hitters because we'll bring them up right now and then we'll go back to the fifth starter after, kind of get Chase's opinion here in a second. The other guy that is fighting for a roster spot is Tyler Wade. Now, he doesn't really fall into either, like he plays left, like he kind of can, but it's more like he's just like a depth piece at like all of the positions. And he's a lefty bat, so they like that. But he's not really a first base DH guy, obviously. And he's not really like fighting for like the left field platoon, but it's more of just like a backup role. So he's like fighting for a roster spot where the other guys are actually fighting for like specific positions, I feel like. But Chase, dude, we're talking about this, right? And I'll let you start. But basically, if you look at it, there's probably four spots that you can fill. Let's just say your everyday left fielder, a backup outfielder, your everyday third baseman or first baseman, sorry, and a backup infielder. That's like the four spots. Maybe they hold one more and they like have one pitcher less. I don't really think that's going to happen, but that's kind of what you're looking at. So, like, in your opinion, who do you project to make the roster? And also, after you project you want to make it, who do you want to make the roster? Because that might be different. Because for me, it's going to be a little bit different. But what are you thinking right now?
So I think Connor Joe automatically makes the roster. He's an intriguing guy. He's already had the MLB experience. He's just kind of been hurt a lot in his career, so you never see his full potential. He has potential to hit for a little bit of power and just average. He plays first and outfield, so he kind of fits two needs. You gave him a contract. I think you platoon him at first with Luis Arias because Arias, realistically, you don't want him starting every day at first. His glove is very volatile. He had a really good defensive outing in playoffs where you're like, wow, oh my God, he's scooping balls. He's making diving plays. But we know that's not the everyday Luis Arias. He misses picks. He sometimes doesn't play correctly. You kind of want someone a little bit more defensively better there. I don't think Yuli Gurriel is going to make the roster at all. Like, he's 40 years old. It's kind of like the Nelson Cruz signing. We saw what happened with that. Let's not repeat the same mistake. The next lock, I think, is Jason Hayward. I know he hit, like 211 with like a low 700, if not barely 700 OPS. However, he gives you versatility in the outfield. He brings a veteran presence into the clubhouse, and he has playoff experience. And if you're going to bring up Tirso or Eggy, having Jason Hayward out there helping them take everyday reps, show them the ropes of being an outfielder in the MLB, and especially being left-handed, it would help Tirso out a lot. So I think he's a lot. And then the next guy, I think Hayward's like the backup outfielder. I don't think he starts every day. I think the guy who wins the the left field spot is Eggy. I know they liked Eggy. He's overhauled his approach to try to hit right-handed hitting better. Even if he struggles a little bit, he still smashes left-handed pitchers. And if you have Tirso out there and he, just it's like a platoon thing, it's not the worst thing in the world. You have two young guys in a platoon hitting against what they do best. Tirso with right-handed pitching and then Eggy with left-handed pitching. So that's if Eggy struggles with right hand, but during the Winter League, like me and Matt were discussing before, he was crushing the ball. So there's that. Gavin Sheets is an intriguing option. He had a really good start of his career, and then every single year and progressively worse and worse and worse. That could be just because he was on the White Sox. The White Sox are one of the most dysfunctional organizations in baseball, if not the most dysfunctional. He can hit for power. He can play outfield. He can play first. You're looking at him to play first base, though. And do you think he's going to get better? Do the Padres have a good history of bringing in guys that have been struggling throughout their career and all of a sudden they turn good? I wouldn't say they have a great track record with it. We've had, a couple splash hits like David Peralta last year coming in and being a great DH left fielder as an aging veteran. But outside of that, not really. For the fifth starter, the Padres really love Kolek. I know he had a good outing today. Kyle Hart's a really intriguing option. He won Cy Young in the KBO. He's overhauled his pitches, what they look like, and his mechanics, is everything. Vasquez is the most intriguing option to me. He can be so good if he was just consistently throwing strikes. His problem is that he will walk three hitters in a row, load the bases, get himself into these situations where he has to pitch perfectly, and sometimes he does, and sometimes he, really messes up and screws up everything. And, he has a 5-run inning, and outside of that one inning, he had a really solid outing. But, it's that one inning of 5 runs and put the team in a really bad spot that, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't have him as a fifth starter. Waldron, he held down the rotation for a good part of the year. I know he wants to throw the knuckleball a little bit more, so it's kind of interesting to see what he's going to do with that. He honestly had a really good stretch of games, and then he became a little bit more hittable, and then that's when he struggled a little bit. Brito is the same thing. If you can get consistent kind of just swing and miss and consistent strikes out of the guy, he could be good. But I feel like he tends to leave his stuff over the heart of the plate, and that's where he gets punished. Unlike Vasquez, where he just walks people, he struggles locating his pitches on the outskirts of the plate where he can get swings and misses. His pitches just become a little too hittable. Henry Baez is an interesting option. He had a good year last year. Don't know too much about him. Haven't seen too much of him. And then we all know Luis Patino. He's a high velocity guy. He's got a wicked slider, has a decent changeup. I'm glad he's back on the team. I just want to see what he can do with Ruben Niebla. I don't think he's a realistic lock for the roster in general. I think he's one of those guys you send into the minor leagues to marinate, work on some things, and then potentially, make a couple spot starts. Or, hey, there's a man down in the bullpen. He comes up and fills that role. I think him and Morejon would be a great duo in the bullpen. They kind of counter each other perfectly. They're both throw hard and throw sliders, but having them come from different arm angles and different sides could be really beneficial. But the bullpen's also a really stacked place. So you got one of these guys and maybe one or two of these guys making the bullpen. But you also have a few relievers trying to fight for a bullpen spot too.
Yeah, dude, it's gonna be interesting. I'll start with and I also like some of these guys. I'm not exactly sure like what the plan is, and like also like maybe it's like, oh yeah, like right now, like I think Brito came in relief in a game, and it's like okay, and he played in relief all like last year. But I think like as spring training like works its way through it, like these things could also change. You know what I mean? Like it's like their plan right now might be like, okay, like Brito and Patino are going to be relief options, but like if they pitch really well and they're like, okay, they're stretched out decently enough, maybe they adjust that. And so I think that's one thing that's important with the pitching stuff, just like looking at it, because it's like we're also just picking guys like, yeah, like I feel like Kyle Hart was signed. This is my like I've thought he was signed to be more of a reliever, but he was a starter last year. So it's like we got to see what that looks like. Kolek, they've obviously talked a lot about, and I want to say like off the top of my head, as of right now, I believe that only Kolek, Vasquez, and Waldron have actually got starts in spring training. I think those are the three that have. I could be wrong on that, but I watched a little bit of Vasquez start, and I watched a little bit of Kolek start. Or actually, I think I watched both starts. Actually, I watched those two starts. I didn't watch Waldron's though. Um, but I'll start with hitting first with the bats, and then I'll get back in the starters because I do think it's really hard to project the starters. But in terms of bats, dude, like I think there's four guys that you're probably gonna keep, maybe five, right? So you can kind of add one if that's the case. But I think you're right. Gurriel, nah, like he's not. It doesn't make any sense. If he makes the roster, it's almost gonna be kind of frustrating because it's like, do you could have gave these spots to somewhere else. My guess, my what I who I think is gonna make it is I think Aggie's gonna make it. I think Connor Joe's gonna make it. I think Jason Hayward's gonna make it, and I think Tyler Wade's gonna make it. I feel pretty confident in that. That's
Yeah.
honestly what I think. I think if Tierso has a really good spring, maybe he could beat out Tyler Wade. But something that we've noticed is like even like the Padres value and like AJ Preller specifically values positional versatility so much that I would be hard pressed to like believe that Tyler Wade's not going to make the roster. I really don't think that's going to happen. Um, Now this stuff can change because like Gavin Sheets could win a roster spot. Tierce Ornelas could win a roster spot, right? Um, Gurriel could win a roster spot too, I guess. But in terms of what makes the most sense, Connor Joe, he's a good righty, and you already got that platoon signed for a reason. Like you signed them, and it was like, okay, this actually makes a lot of sense why they're doing this. Um, Tyler Wade was kind of the backup reserve player. He doesn't play that much, but he usually pops in into like big games and to play the infield, and he can be a guy that can play a bunch of different positions. And the whole offseason, like you brought him up already, Chase, but the whole spring training so far, even though we're like what 5 games in, it's been about Iggy Rosario. He hit an opposite field home run against a righty, and the whole thing is like he's getting better at hitting righties. He's getting better at hitting righties. That's what all the beat reporters are talking about. He's been super hyped up, and it almost feels like he's starting to become the guy that they're like, this is going to be our starting left fielder. That's what like in terms of like storylines and just how everyone's been talking about it and like talking about him and like how much of like how much of just Padres media overall has been all over Eggy, that makes it feel to me like it's almost like the team be like, yo, hype this guy up. Like he's our guy. Because I'm sorry, but this is sports, bro. Like you start listening to this stuff for a while and you start to pick up like, yeah, dude, you're gonna hear like who they want to play from the team media a lot more. So I really think that it's Iggy Rosario's spot. Like he's got to win it, but I think it's his spot to win. So which I'm super excited for because like he's came up and like last year when he played, he was pretty good, like and he was only a guy that would come up against lefties and stuff. But it seems like he's really tried to take that next step, and they've adjusted him. They've done a lot of stuff. So that's my projection. Ideally, I think that you have Tirso beat out Tyler Wade, though it does leave you a little bit thin in the infield. That is the problem. That's where it gets a little bit funky, and that's why I just don't think that's going to happen. Um, I also think it's a lot easier if Tirso and Gavin Sheets start out in AAA, and they're like the guys that can earn a roster spot throughout the season. Where like Aggies bounced back and forth a bunch already. Like this is his chance. Tirso hasn't done that. Like he still has more time, even though he's what like 24 years old. But I still think that's just kind of how it is right now. So that's my overall thoughts there. Starter wise, you brought up Vasquez. I think you said he's the most like intriguing option. I definitely think you're right. But dude, the same thing. watching his start the other day, loads the bases up in the first inning. You know what I mean? It's just that's the issue. And it's like, so I don't know. I don't know. I think ideally, honestly, like the best case scenario is that it's kind of hard to pick. Well, one is, of course, it's like it's hard to pick, but the best case scenario is that Kyle Hart wins it. Like that's what I think at least. He's a lefty. He completely revamped his game. You have him on, almost like nothing deal, and you can just have him go out there and just be like a solid player for you. You also have an option next year, once again, really cheap, where if he came over to the Padres this year and you got 2 years of him as a fifth starter, that would be insane value. Absolutely insane value. Next guy that would probably be the best is probably Vasquez because you traded Juan Soto from him, and obviously you got a lot more. Same thing goes with Brito and stuff like that. But like, and obviously Michael King, we're not talking about that. Michael King's a baller. We're going to be talking about Michael King extension for a while now. But Vasquez was a big piece. You went and traded for him. You have control with him. You have control with Brito. Kolek, you took him in what? It was a Rule 5 draft, I want to say. He's on the roster for a while last year. But the other thing with this, like this conversation is like Kolek can go be a starter in AAA or AA or wherever you want to put him, and he can develop there a lot more as a starter because he seems like almost more like a developmental piece. That's why I don't really think he's gonna start. Like, I think this matchup, honestly, I think there's everyone else is on the outside looking in, but I really think it's Hart, Vasquez, and Waldron. And if some other guys really start to like shine and look really good, then those guys might start being more tossed around in the combo. Brito, it does almost feel like he's been a reliever for the Padres, like, and that's what he's going to be. Though it does seem kind of odd because he doesn't really have the stuff to be a reliever. Like, I don't think so, at least. Maybe they feel like he is, but like just in terms of like, I'd rather have him pitch longer, and potentially become a starter. But I think it's Hart, Vasquez, and Waldron. I think no offense to Waldron, we've talked about him before, Matt Waldron, but like he's a knuckleballer. I think you're gonna get like kind of a high 40 ERA consistently whenever he pitches, and he can pitch like 6 innings a game. Like he can give you a little bit extra in terms of like how many innings he can go consistently, but I don't think there's as much upside in him as there is in Hart or Vasquez. So that's ultimately what I would like to see happen. Patino would also be a really cool thing if he ended up turning around and like became something. Also, the fact that he would like started out in San Diego, gets moved around, that was the Snell trade, and then he ends up coming back and ends up being a guy that would be really awesome. But I do think that it's more likely that he starts as a reliever here this year. And then Baez is super young, and I think we're more intrigued for him in a couple years, I feel like. But either way, that's what I'm kind of thinking overall.
I agree with you. The Padres just really love Kolek, and they say he's got a 5-pitch mix. I know we think it's going to be Hart, Vasquez, but I honestly can see Kolek coming out and winning it. Like you said, the team media really tells you who you want, and they hype up Kolek like there's no tomorrow. Though,
dude, that's a super fair point.
Like, I want it to be Vasquez. I want Vasquez to figure out how to find the strike zone consistently. If he does, he's amazing. We saw him at the end of last year go on like a 3 or 4 game like pitching streak where he maybe like runs and go like 6 innings. It was great. But then, he has games where he goes 4 innings and gives up 7 runs and like 5 walks. You don't know which Vasquez you're going to get. And that's the part that, as a 5th starter, that's okay. But if you want to make a deep playoff push, you're going to need your 5th starter to be at least decently, consistently meh. Like I wouldn't mind Waldron or ERA as a 5th starter. That's perfectly fine with me. We know Waldron's capable of that, and we, as a knuckleballer, I don't think we really have to worry about his arm being fatigued out the entire year because I think he wanted to throw it more, around like 35 or 40%. It's going to be less fatigue on his arm. He can go longer into games because he's not throwing the ball as hard as he can every single pitch. I think that's one advantage to having Waldron. But then, Kyle Hart, lefty. We don't have a lefty in the rotation, and that bugs me tremendously. I feel like you always need at least one lefty. as long as there's a few lefties in the bullpen, I guess it balances out.
Hey, it worked all right last year.
It
I mean,
still bugs me.
it's a pretty similar situation, honestly. Obviously, Waldron won it last year out of spring training, but we saw a lot of Vasquez. We saw Brito in the relief role. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing is like the chances like whoever makes it or whatever, like you're gonna see other guys too. I just think that Kolek. I think you're right about Kolek. I just think that the way that they have it lined up is for him to go to AAA and just kind of get better. Because like last year, he didn't really get to like develop as a starter for obvious reasons, you know. Um, but I think that just makes a lot more sense from a developmental standpoint. But I mean, you could be right. And also, the bottom line of like with all this stuff is like we're talking about spring training roster battles because the roster battles. So like it's gonna depend on how they perform on the field. Not even necessarily. I feel like it's in the games is a lot overrated. I think it's like day to day how they look, especially pitching. It's like, oh, you did this and this, but it's like, yeah, but how did you look when you did like simulated stuff? How did you look? How does your off speed look? What is he able to think about this? Where it's like they might, for instance, like Kyle Hart, for instance. I keep saying, for instance, sorry guys, we haven't recorded in a while. I forgot to talk, I guess. But Kyle Hart, he was not good in the MLB. Then he goes over to the KBO, wins their version of the Cy Young. And was awesome. And he changed a lot of stuff. And they're showing his slider. I think he changed his slider up, and it's like a sweeper now. And they did a bunch of stuff. And I was watching his, like things on his arm angles, basically. And like you look at the track of the baseball when he's throwing off speed, and you're like, okay, yeah, like the KBO doesn't have the same level of hitters that the MLB does, but look at the pitches. Look at the break on these pitches. Look at the speed this guy's throwing, and you're like, all right, this makes a lot more sense why he was so much better, like had such a dominant season there. But I think that's really what's going to depend on this. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe, maybe Patino is the guy or whoever it is. But I feel like right now heading into it, that's what I'm expecting at least. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with all. Chase, you got any stuff to add? I know you talk a little bit more about the pitching, but
I really don't want Tyler Wade back on the roster. I know he's like Thanos, he's inevitable, but like, can we find another like Eggy? Here's the thing: Eggy can also play infield. He has played infield before. If we need a depth piece, we can have Tirso and Eggy in the outfield, and then hey, you know what? Machado needs a day off. Eggy can go play third, and then you just kind of move him down the line. Sure, it's not going to be as good as defensively, but he's got better bat than Tyler Wade. The only thing Tyler Wade brings is one, he can play every position but first base in the infield, and speed. That is the two things he brings. He had a 540 OPS. You can't win games with a bench piece that can't hit.
well, the thing is that they love him, bro. Like you hear how they talk about
I
him.
know.
Like that's why it's like that's what you say. It's inevitable he's gonna make the roster. That's why. Like, and they're already this year. Like we're talking about the same thing where it's like, oh yeah, they keep bringing up Egg. It's like they're bringing up Tyler Wade a lot. Have you noticed that? Like I see all this stuff like all these like Tyler Wade. Like,
Right.
oh, that Tyler Wade's the best
It comes
teammate
out
ever.
this one,
Like
goes out this one.
yeah. So you agree? You think he's gonna make it too, right?
I don't want him to, but he's gonna make the roster.
The problem is just that it feels like there's less upside. But to play devil's advocate to that, what does it really do, for instance, for Tirso, to put him in and have him play, get 6 at bats a week, 5 at bats a week in the MLB? Right?
Yeah.
Because I don't
At the
think
same
that's the
time,
role
he's
for
been
Aiken.
on
I don't
board
think
for so long that I think you can make a very viable platoon there, where you have Eggy coming in off the bat. Like you can still get Eggy every single day at bats with Tirso in the outfield as a platoon player. You're going to need a pinch hitter. Hey, you know what? Tirso this day, the right-handed pitcher came out in the 6th inning. We're down. All right, Eggy, you're playing the last 3 innings. You can still do that.
no. And I think, dude, I think you're totally right. I think what they're gonna end up opting for is I think there's a path, but I think Tirso has to be so good. That's the reason
Yeah.
why. Because you can make the same exact case with Jason Hayward as your 4th outfielder. The same one.
Yeah,
You you're
damn
going
it.
up. You know, like that's the thing. So I don't know. That's why ultimately I think that's what it's gonna look like. Gavin Sheets
But I
seemed
like
like balled
Hayward.
out.
The only reason I like Hayward is like as a mentor to the younger guys in the outfield. That's the only reason I want Hayward on the roster. That and he can play all three outfield positions.
Hayward is like the Tyler Wade of the outfield, but he's a lot better. Like he's a lot better. He has
Careers.
like a one. He's like a 150 OPS higher than Tyler Wade, and he's like a legit platoon guy too. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
He's a legit platoon guy. I mean, there's a reason that they signed Connor Joe and Jason Hayward, like opposed to like other guys that are like fighting for roster spots. Like, which doesn't mean that they don't have a plan for them or anything like that, but there's a reason that late, a couple weeks ago, they went out and got both of them, and they're like, yeah, these guys are kind of perfect platoon pieces. What do you know? They're probably going to be platoon pieces. So, yeah. All right, dude. I think it's going to do it. Yeah. I don't
Oh,
know
I
what
just
our schedule.
just one question popped up.
Yeah.
So, do you think it's going to be one of those things where Connor Joe, like, if they don't think Eggy is that guy, Connor Joe plays left field, and then Arias plays first, and then whenever Arias goes to DH, Connor Joe goes to first, and then Hayward goes to left. If they don't think Eggy's that guy.
Yeah. And he'd probably be a platoon, or they would do something, or, whatever. But, bro, I already told you the media's been loving Eggy, and he's been playing well too, and like he's got so much hype over the beginning part. So but I think you're right. I think that is the thing. Like I think that is the other path, which is also like, dude, that's a great way to do it because there's a spot now for your young player to come in and become a starter, and you also have a backup plan if he's not.
Yeah.
And like even though people have been so down on the Padres roster this offseason, it's like because Isaac and I were talking about this when went live last time. Dude, like people are so down on the roster, but it's like there's not many holes. This is still a super complete roster. This is a really good team. Now, the future of the Padres, it gets a lot more scary. A lot more questions come up because there's a lot of guys on 1-year contracts. But for this year, no, this is a good team, dude. Like having one roster spot where it's like you have like I think it's good that you bring that up too because it's like you have a backup option, you have veterans that are going to be pretty solid players at the very least, and you have a young guy that might come up. Like that's what you want at these options.
Yeah.
We're talking about a starting rotation. It's like, okay, yeah, we wrote down 7 guys' names for one roster, like one rotation spot. Now, a lot of them aren't super into it, but like 3 of them are super legit guys and super legit options. So that's where it's just, I don't know. I that frustrated me a lot this offseason where it's like, oh, like this, and it's like, they didn't have money to spend, man. They weren't going to do anything unless they traded
The
guys. The
whole
only way
ownership thing too.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's so much going on. Like, and it's like everyone, like when they made the trades for Cease and they made the Soto trade and they made the Rise trade, it was like, yeah, they are running this back for 2 years. That was my thought last year. I was very confident, like this is cool because they're gonna have it 2 years of this. We get 2 years of it. This is the second year, and then there's gonna be changes after that, obviously. But there's also like it's
Just
very
unfortunately,
very rare that there's even this much continuity in a baseball roster 1 year to the next. What the Padres just had this year, like you never see that. It's usually there's like 5 new guys starting in different spots or in different like high leverage pitching roles.
it's
So
just
I don't know.
unfortunate that the Dodgers also just got better, but
That's the
that's the only
thing.
down. The
But you're
whole
only looking
NL
at,
West is just stacked, and that's the unfortunate part. But it's also great for baseball.
yeah, exactly. But yeah. All right, dude. I think it's gonna do it. We'll be going live or something eventually, and we'll figure out a little schedule for as the season goes on. I mean, my thought is that we'll probably do like lives, like probably like
So I don't know if that was my internet or his internet, but like you said, we're gonna figure out a schedule for live streams. Uh, Try to get that weekly thing at a certain time. Just make it consistent for everybody, so y'all can tune in, and then we can get y'all episodes and everything. So with that, we're gonna wrap it up. It was nice to see y'all. Hopefully, I'm back a little bit more often. Working 2 jobs has kind of made it really difficult with everybody's schedule, but we'll try to get that more consistent when season gets here. So have a good night, y'all.